Well, good morning, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots. We're starting off on a very good subject, and I have to say I was a little bit discouraged a month ago when Drew Barnes set out and says, oh, we should have a referendum during the election in March of 2023. And I just shuddered, and holy smokes, that doesn't work. And so my question is, and I'm going to talk about why we shouldn't do that, but my question is our goal to have a referendum to tell the rest of Canada and the world that we're mad? Or is our goal to be sovereign and a free and prosperous nation and have the opportunity for our children and grandchildren to grow up in a country that actually understands the purpose and role of government, and that's to protect the freedoms of their people and to restrict the size and scope of government? And so I guess I'm going to go off with a few war analogies. First of all, I love the old one when they're waiting to start the battle, and the commander says, you don't shoot until you see the white of their eyes. And to me, we don't have a referendum until we know we have a supermajority. Well, the question is how do we get to that supermajority, and can we achieve that? And I say absolutely. The worst thing that we could do, in my opinion, is to fight for a referendum. This is about a fight for freedom and absolutely nothing short of that. And if we lose our goal on freedom and a sovereign nation, I don't believe that we'll ever get there. And so sometimes the best way to answer a question is with a question. And so I've written down a few series of questions here. And again, I'm being challenged without the light. I need the eyes and light, but we'll see what we go here. I guess we'll start with those who helped build our province, those that knew that there was a future, that came out here with the opportunity. Oh, thank you. that came out here because they had this hope of this opportunity for freedom and prosperity, for health, for wealth, to get away from the cities, and this opportunity to work hard and then to reap the rewards of your hard work. And so my first question is what most seniors ask me is, well, what happens to my Canada pension plan? And so they don't really realize that we're actually subsidizing the rest of the seniors in the country, and that we actually put in almost, not quite double of what our seniors need, but we can actually enhance their benefits and reduce our premiums. And so that's an important question for them to answer. The next one is what about all of the public sector who are concerned and will, like, who's going to pay for my job? Like, how's that going to work? And so how could we give them confidence that what we're doing is in their benefit if we haven't created and collecting all the taxes here and knowing that we have the funds because we've kept them here? We no longer have a shared bank account, or I use the analogy all the time. Every day we get up to go to work, the bullies from Eastern Canada take our money, our lunch money, our survival money, and then come noon when we say, well, we'd like to eat, where's our lunch money? And the bully says, oh, sorry, we don't have any left, and we gave it all out, and we go without. And so we need to have the money in the bank, our own bank account, and to make sure that we can actually pay our public employees, and they feel that security and they know that it's there. What about all those citizens? And I think that maybe this question is a little bit different, that live in rural Alberta. And we in Alberta, especially rural Alberta, understand the importance of law and order. If all of a sudden we don't have the RCMP and we haven't created the Alberta Police Force first, we need to do those things. What happens to the many Albertans right now, more I think than since the 1930s, of unemployed Albertans? Their employment insurance comes from Canada. Well, if we don't have our own Alberta employment program, they're going to be nervous and say, well, why would I want to vote for something like that and not have employment insurance? And again, when you look at the equalization program and how that works, our workers here in Alberta pay for over 100% of, I guess, like we give more, again, like the CPP, we actually put more into the employment insurance program than our unemployed get back out of it. And we all know here in Alberta, you have to work harder and longer in order to even qualify for unemployment insurance, or as they like to say, employment insurance, because we don't want to be unemployed. And so until we have our employment insurance program up and running, we need to make sure those people are comfortable and realize that, oh no, this is okay. We're not going to have a problem with that. There's just so many questions that how is business going to feel not knowing that in between arbitrary time, if they're going to be successful, if we don't actually have a government that's putting those things in order, that they actually realize that our borders are open for business, and we're going to stand up for those businesses, and we're not going to punish them with regulations and rules that don't allow them to actually be competitive with the rest of the world. They need to see that. We need to get our government in order. And then one day he talked about fear and the fear of the unknown, and whether you have the courage to actually take, have that faith to go one step at a time when you know where your goal is and what you want to achieve. But he talked about this Saudi prince and how thieves were caught and they were brought before the prince and they were asked, are you guilty? Yeah, and go through it all. And he says, well, you know what the sentence is for thieves? And well, yeah, I get my head cut off. He says, well, I'm feeling generous today. You have two options. One, we'll cut your head off, or two, you can go through that black door and take the consequences of what's behind that black door. And anyways, after years and years, his loyal servant that was working with him finally asked, Prince, what's behind that black door? And in 20 years, nobody has chosen the black door. And he says, well, I'm getting old. I guess it's time I'll let this out, but it could be the demise of our kingdom, but it's freedom. Anybody who has the courage to step into the unknown will have their freedom. And to me, we're going to have way too many Albertans right now if we just pull the trigger because we're mad and upset at Ottawa and fire a shot down to Ottawa, say we want a referendum. We won't have that opportunity for freedom. To me, this is a one-shot battle. This is a battle for freedom, and if we lose it, it will take 20 or 30 years, maybe 80 years before we'll have another chance. But worse than that is that we'll be economically oppressed. I think that we'll be socially oppressed. We'll be at their will on what Ottawa wants to do. And we're already seeing that, in my opinion, with our premier, who's very worried about transfer payments and asking for money, asking for $6 billion and getting $700 million. He's constantly asking and begging Ottawa. And I've also been saying for the last 6 months is that equalization will change, but it's when we're a have-not province. And they'll say, well, you guys don't believe in equalizations. Why would we send you any money? We're changing the equalizations now. And that's not good enough. We'll be in a situation where we just can't look after ourselves, and we will become dependent on Ottawa. But we really need to put our house in order. We need to know what our goal is, what we're trying to achieve, and focus on that. Anything less than that is not going to get us the results that we need. And when we're looking at those things, I've been talking the 6 main things for me is, number one, we need to collect our own taxes. We need the Alberta Revenue Agency. Number 2, we need a police force. We can't have Ottawa and the RCMP deciding such things as whether or not we can gather in a meeting, whether or not we can fly in and out of the country, whether or not we can have our businesses open. And currently right now, it's all being dictated. And many people will also ask the question, and this is probably the more prevalent question, is our current government is colluding with our federal government and allowing these things to happen. This intrusion is just being taken with a smile or being complicit with it. I was completely outraged when I heard those first people basically being arrested at the airport by federal security agents, I'm not sure who they were, and being hauled off to hotels and being charged to do that. And our premier just said, oh, it's not me. It's not me. Well, he's there to defend Albertans, not to sit back and say, oh, I'm not the bully, I'm not doing anything, and point the finger somewhere else. That's not good enough. And it's the same thing with this order in council to confiscate our guns and to say that, peaceful and responsible gun owners are going to become criminals. And that's just unacceptable. He should be standing up and saying no. But what we actually need is a police force that's being overseen, what I want to say is an elected civilian oversight. And again, as everybody knows with myself, when someone's elected, they're accountable through recall. But we need those people to be there. I was in High River, and as our good MP spoke yesterday, we won't give out any names because of liable problems or whatever, but we had ministers that were down in High River that either turned a blind eye or said, hey, we better try this, because they allowed it to happen. And there wasn't anything that we could do at that point because the government was in collusion again against the people. And that's the most important thing, is that the government and why people form government is to protect our God-given rights and freedoms, not to take them away, not to limit them. Thank you. And so we need the revenue agency, and we need a police force that is actually there to protect Albertans, not to punish them, not to ticket them, not to put them in jail or whatever else that they're doing. And again, with a police state, probably the more alarming thing is that they set up the snitch lines. And it's very disappointing to see how many Albertans are turning on other Albertans that, oh, so-and-so's got more people over at his house. I've heard some just terrible stories that have happened because of people are calling up and snitching and saying this is happening. And again, we all know, and Dr. Hodgkinson went over it so very well, that yes, the virus is real, but it's not deadly, and it's not as deadly as these lockdowns is when it comes to the social and economic and spiritual well-being of Albertans. And so we need to have our own Alberta pension plan. We need to have our own employment plan. And we need to have our own immigration plan. And those are all things that we can, and Premier Kenney can do right now, because they're constitutionally our responsibility. But there are those two things that we have to do that is outside the Constitution. And many people want to read us the Riot Act. Well, you can't do that. Well, it's one of those things where you don't ask for permission. We just have to do it. We need to stand up and say, and we're doing that. And again, there's no question that the Constitution isn't being respected for Albertans. Section 121 says that we are able to send out or to sell our resources to the world. And we know Bill C-48, Bill 69, the whole Environmental Act is an absolute vicious attack on our industry, on Albertans, and on our workers. And we can't just respond angrily and say, well, we want a referendum. We want to say no to this. No, we need to have a plan. I love this, it's now an old movie, I guess, but I still remember it quite vividly, is Sleeping with the Enemy. We are sleeping with the enemy, and we need to get out. And so whether you want to say we're in prison and we need to have an escape plan, or we're sleeping with the enemy, we're in a broken, dysfunctional relationship, and we need to focus on that. And what we do is we put our house in order. We go through those things. We have our revenue agency. We have our police force. We have our Alberta pension plan, our employment insurance plan. We have our, I go through those so many times, it should be off the tip of my tongue, our immigration. And when we do all of those things, what we actually do is that we create that confidence of Albertans that we have our house in order and that we're okay. We're not asking Ottawa for transfers back. We're not asking Ottawa for permission to build a pipeline. I don't know how many of you are aware, but a year ago on the 19th of February, TC Energy applied for and got the okay from the new Canada Energy Regulator to build the Nova Gas transmission expansion line here in Alberta. It was a $1.5 billion program with 5,000 jobs. And this was just right there 1 month before the lockdown. And what did it do? It got hijacked because of Bill 69 and taken into cabinet, and it sat there for 240 days when the bill actually says they only have 90 days to delay it. But what was just galling and most problematic is that they added 5 extra conditions that the Canadian Energy Regulator had struck down, says these aren't reasonable. These are open-ended conditions. And what did our Premier do on the 19th and 20th of October with our Energy Minister? Stood up and says, well, we think that we can help TC Energy meet these new requirements. Unacceptable. should have been shut down. We should have had the pipeline built. There should have been people working this year, through this last winter, drilling and producing, because that line was supposed to be built and done in April, and it wasn't. But those freedom, and that's the goal. And so what we need to do is have our house in order. We need to give confidence. We need to have hope for Albertans that there's a future, and not just an emotional mad reaction saying we got to vote in a referendum and then lose that. And I think that one thing that most everybody will agree, even when they're hardcore separatists, is that a referendum today will fail. And if Jason Kenney is to run a referendum in 2023 in conjunction, do you think that he's going to actually be wanting to show any confidence in Alberta? He will want us to lose that. He said that he is a nationalist, that he is for federalism, and he has no desire, and he says, I won't do that. And the most important thing was that when you're fighting for freedom, when you're fighting for your future, you actually want someone who's leading that battle at the front line, who believes in it, not somebody who just wants to lead a parade and sees where there's a group that will buckle at the first moment or opportunity to leave. But I hope that you can share that message with everyone, is that it's about putting our house in order, giving that confidence to Albertans that we will have our freedom, we will have our future, and we don't need to worry about that if we do it in the right sequence. But hope everybody will share that message, that we're looking for freedom, not for a referendum. But thanks for having me this morning, and God bless each of you for coming out. That you're freedom fighters, and that's what it's about. And so Danny says we're going to have some questions.
Sure. We're free to have some questions. A couple of times you actually said Jason wanted a referendum in 2023. We're actually talking, you wanted it in 23. Yeah, you wanted it in 23. They wanted it in 21. Yeah. But in any event, we've got a few minutes. Would anybody? Yes. Go ahead, Richie. Richie and then Kevin. We'll bring you the microphone.
Thank you, Danny. Go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Hinman, I strongly support your position, and thank you very much for what you've devoted your life to help give freedom to Alberta. I strongly support your strategy, but I think one thing I haven't heard that I think is very important that needs to be addressed early on is negotiations with an agreement from First Nations in Alberta. I think it's an elephant in the room, and unless it's dealt with, if we assume we can have a new country here and then just tell them, okay, now you're part of Alberta instead of Canada, I don't think that would go very well. And in my discussions with some of them, there seems to be three positions, and I'm sure there are a lot more, but there are those that would rather continue to deal with the devil they know than one they don't know. And as we know, the history of First Nations negotiations with the Indian Affairs in Canada has never gone very well for First Nations. The second group that believe they have constitutional veto, that nothing can happen without their agreement, so they don't care if you negotiate with them or not. In the end, they'll tell you what they want in order to be a separate country. And then the third are those that are as excited as we are for something better for them as Albertans in the country of Alberta. And so I just wondered if there's been any backroom discussions on that. Has there been any approach to find leadership among First Nations that we can start to talk to? Or is it an issue we haven't thought of? Because I think it needs to be dealt with.
Excellent question, and appreciate that. And you're not the first one who asked that. And my first comment is that why do we want our freedom in a sovereign nation? It's because of the dysfunctional and abuse of Ottawa and their inability to actually provide us or protect our freedom and our opportunity in the future. And I look at the Indigenous people that I know, and I grew up and went to school, had two the Piikani and the Kainai, got friends in both of them. And the bottom line is the abuse that they've taken. They don't even have any property rights. They don't. That Indian Affairs looks after everything and anything they do. They've got to get Ottawa's permission to do anything. And I think if anybody has interest more so than Albertans, it's the Indigenous people here and their treatment. And so I'll start with there. Number two, we can have talks, and I've reached out to a few, but most of the bands are really locked down because of COVID, and they've had problems with that, and they don't really want to meet. Number three is that they only like to meet with those people that actually can negotiate and do something. And again, this goes back to the question, do we want a referendum in 2023, or do we want a government that's going to fight for our freedom? When we form government in 2023, then we can sit down and talk to them, and we will have time to show them that what their opportunity is, that they will be equal citizens. It'll be one country, one law, one citizen. They won't be second or third class citizens. They'll actually own their land. It will be theirs. And I think that there's a very compelling reason that they would want to join us in that. But again, for me, I would recognize them, that it's up to them. If they don't want to join us and they want to stay part of Canada and they think that that's where their future is, we can be very much like Europe and open borders at this point. I live down in southern Alberta. The Blackfoot have a tribe on both sides of the border. They just go back and forth with their status card. They don't even have a passport. And I think that we can do the same here if that's what it comes down to. But I think that they have a greater interest and a greater future and a greater opportunity being part of a new country than part of the old one where, like I say, they have no control of their land, of their future. Everything has to be, even their royalty rights are in a fund out in Ottawa that they have no access to without bureaucrats telling them what they can and can't do. But I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Paul. Actually, Danielle Smith asked that question to Chief Boucher from Fort McKay and Chief Morin from River Cree last January at that Future of Alberta meeting. And Chief Boucher spoke, and he said the average income on their reserve was higher than the Canadian average. And he said in the year that he was speaking, I think their Fort McKay bands paid, I think it was $96 million in corporate income tax from the work that they were doing at Fort McKay. So Danielle asked both of them, she was facilitating a panel with them, and she asked both of them if they'd given any thought to an independent Alberta. And they both just started shaking their heads like, absolutely not. And she said, well, I'm surprised, because she said, everyone in Canada complains about how, Ottawa treats them, but quite frankly, no one complains any more than the First Nations. And she said, what would possibly make you think that the new country of Alberta would treat you worse than the old country of Canada? And they both just sort of sat there and said, I guess we never really thought about it. And we've reached out to Chief Boucher, and Paul's going to meet with him. He works quite a bit. He's not the chief anymore, but he works out of Calgary quite a bit. And Paul's going to be meeting with him at some time, sort of whenever they can get it organized. So I think they're open to the discussion too, Richie, and certainly some of the most progressive bands like Fort McKay, Chief Louis in Penticton, their reserves, they've sort of embraced free enterprise and freedom, and their bands have a lower unemployment rate than most of our, certainly more than lower unemployment rates than our cities do right now. But even before the slowdown, they had an amazing employment rate and a standard of living for their people. So I think they understand the opportunity, and you're right. It's a matter of having the discussion. So go ahead, Kevin. Oh, sorry.
One more comment on that. Sorry. And I have reached out. I don't know if you know Calvin Helen. He heads up the Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor to go out to Prince Rupert. And again, the bands are on side with him. The vast majority, I would say over 85, maybe 95% are wanting to do that. And the Kenney government has abandoned them. I mean, they were dealing with them. He was supportive of Kenney getting in elected. And then they created this new investment firm, and they just dropped him like a hot potato and ignoring him. And the most important thing that we need is to partner with the Indigenous people and build a pipeline to Prince Rupert. They want it, we want it, and this is a win-win for everyone except for Ottawa and the enviro hypocrites. But for the rest of the world, more oil from Canada is for a better world and a better Alberta. But hope that gives you enough information.
Thank you, Mr. Hinman. Oh, good. This mic's working now. I was thinking these microphones are like liberal microphones. They only work some of the time. But the treaty you were referring to earlier is called the Jay Treaty, which allows them to pass, First Nations to pass between the border. It has to do with something in Ontario, between one of the states out there. We should start calling these the CNA, and it seems like there's a lot more comments than questions. But I'm glad you addressed the First Nations concerns. It does seem like if you listen to mainstream media that a lot of them are against development, and that's just categorically wrong. I mean, just like non-First Nations Canadians, there's a mix. There's a mix of opinions. You go to some of the reserves along the Eagle Spirit Pipeline and you do find some opposition to it, but the vast majority, as you're right, 85%, I don't know the exact numbers, but most of the chiefs and councils there are supportive of it. And it's not because they see it as a destruction of the environment. They see it as an opportunity to protect the environment more, because when they're involved in the process and development and not just rubber stamping something that's already been decided by some corporation in Texas or somewhere else, when they're actually involved in the ownership and the actual implementation of it and operating it, it provides jobs as well as an opportunity to see that this is going to be something that's safe. And I know I was speaking with Dr. Moore yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about that, this mentality out there that a lot of First Nations are opposed to development when in fact they're not. Danny just talked about Fort McKay and the support that there is there for projects. So it's about sustainably developing these things and involving people from the beginning. So I'm really glad that the question came up about, I was going to ask a real short question about First Nations and consideration of all this, but it was asked before. That's why I'm giving a comment now. I've worked on a reserve now for 11 years. So I've had an opportunity to work with people there. And there's some really amazing folks out there that I think are more aligned with these things than maybe the media would have us believe. So. Yeah.
I'll comment one more thing. I don't know how many of you follow Vivian Krause, but she's done a very good job of following the money. And those that are opposed, I would say 90% of them are being funded by foreign enterprises and foreign groups that the Tides organizations, Sierra Club, and those ones. And those that are opposed are actually being paid and receiving funds to oppose it. Which I mean, I'm sorry, it's just not the general view. I don't think that's out there when you talk to them or their actual leaders and what the opportunity is. But another question.
Martin Brusso, Athabasca. With the fall referendum that Kenny wants, we all know that it's best to wait till the election in 2023, and evidence shows so. Why couldn't we file a court challenge against the fall referendum?
I'll be real brief on that when you can. I just don't think that it's a plausible system. The courts are run by the federal government and the provincial government. They don't want them. But no, we do. People do have that option. I just don't see it as one that would take the time and the energy and the effort only to be running into a glass wall, in my opinion. But I would certainly, support anybody, and even yourself, if you want to try and make that effort. One thing I'll say is that anybody who's fighting for our freedom and our future, let's go full force.
If there's no more questions, we'll call that good. We've got quite a bit of time for sort of question and answer as the day goes by. So now we've got, is there one more? I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Where was it? Oh, well, speaking of freedom, here's Mr. Freedom himself, Rick Strangman. Go ahead.
You gentle on the mister, sir.
Yeah, okay.
It's good morning. It's Rick Strankman, and I've been listening intently for the last day or so here. It's a pleasure to be in the room with a lot of other like-minded people, particularly the gentleman standing beside you there, Danny, Mr. Hinman. He's been around, and he was kind enough to present me at one point in time with a freedom pin. If you remember that occasion, Paul, is well received. What I'd like to say is to a lot of folks here and those that are listening is some of the experiences, some of what I learned in my activism and then elected role was the idea of being proactive. And that's some of what this event is doing. It's being proactive. And with that, Paul, I'd like to ask you, in your travels, are you finding that Albertans are, I will say, ready for a form of change? It seems that the media and others are quick to come forward with the word separation, as opposed to something that I believe that you and I are on the same grounds with, is independence. I fought for choice for my property. There are gun owners in the room. Todd is here, Todd Brown, who believes that it's his property, it's his right. And I think that this whole idea of a referendum is a mechanism potentially for Albertans to exercise their independence and freedom. It's not saying that, not unlike a child leaving their home, they're seeking independence. Yes, you could say they're separating from their parents, but they're only seeking adult independence. And if we as Albertans could strive for greater autonomy or a demonstration of autonomy with for example, the Chief Firearms Officer, taxation, the Alberta Revenue Agency, as you described, or our police force, we could demonstrate that we're mature enough to attain that autonomy. And I was wondering, Paul, if you think that in the sense that you get from people, and you've traveled before, I remember you traveling in the Wild Rose era, are you sensing that Albertans are ready for that? Or are they chafing at the bit, or are they hesitant, as you also described, to go through that black door?
Thanks, Rick. And again, I remember vividly that day down in Lethbridge, Alberta. I don't remember the date. I think it was in November, but do you remember what was the date when you went to jail, Rick? But that was a fight for freedom, and I have a great deal of respect for those individuals like Rick. I think there was 13 of you that ended up being incarcerated at that point, but that was a true stand for freedom. Albertans, and again, rural Alberta is always more cognizant of the situation than the cities. I mean, urban people just live in their own kind of bubble. They don't necessarily feel it as well. But when you go to Calgary and the decimation of their economy there, it's much more prevalent. But absolutely, there are Albertans that are coming to realize that this is a broken, dysfunctional relationship. But I would argue that those people who think that a referendum is the first step to sovereignty, I think are greatly mistaken. It's the last step for sovereignty. And it's about putting everything in order, showing that confidence, because they won't pick that black door, not knowing what the future is. And about 25%, according to the polls, of Albertans want to separate. But I would say there's 50% that don't have the confidence or the belief that we will be better off separate. And so that's why we need to show them, it's show me the freedom, show me the prosperity, show me the health, show me the wealth. All of those things are being just viciously attacked at this point. And when you look at our healthcare system and the way that's failing, and our premier, has gone on for a year saying the most important thing isn't protecting our freedoms, it's protecting our failed and dysfunctional healthcare system, that it couldn't handle it if people got sick. I mean, they had a year to build more facilities, to train more nurses, to be ready for the flu season. If the flu season has escalated and we need to have double the capacity, that's what they should be spending billions of dollars on, not billions of dollars on chasing PCR testing or following people. And they're not solving the problem. But as these problems escalate, absolutely, more and more Albertans are more aware of it and realizing that we need to do something. But like I say, for me, it's not about autonomy. We live in a crazy world that is printing money at an unprecedented rate and spending it. And our own prime minister has said that, we want globalism. We want a great reset. I mean, thank you. Klaus Schwab, has said on the World Economic Forum, by 2030, what they hope is that we will own nothing and we will be happy. I mean, that this is their agenda. This is what they're trying to do. And there's no question in my mind, but what Trudeau too wants to do is to destroy our economy, to destroy our ability to provide for ourselves. He wants us to be hand and foot and looking to the federal government. Calvin Helen, in his book, Economic Dependency Trap, talks about how government does that. And so do you want a prosperous and free and healthy and wealthy nation, or do you want to be dependent? And again, you can look around all the countries in the world. Socialism has never worked and it never will work. The redistribution of wealth, the punishment of those who work hard, when merit is thrown out the window, we know what we get. I'll do one last brief comment on this because I think it's the best analogy, especially for the young people that look at this. If they went to grade 12 and in that year they says, well, we're going to redistribute the marks of everybody. And we're going to make sure that everybody passes and has an opportunity to be there. And so the first test is written, and there's 2 or 3 students that get 98%, and there's some that, 95, 90%, and on down all the way to those students who were lucky to be just because they don't get held back and they're getting 40 or 35%. And they average it all out, and oh, this is great. We got a 67% average. By the end of the year, those students who were working hard and had a goal to get into, whether it's medicine, dentistry, physics, a brain surgeon, who knows what, their incentive to work hard and to study and to excel is gone. And socialism has proved that you destroy the initiative, the freedom, and we just need to look around the world, whether it's Venezuela or anything else. The people lose their hope, their desire to do something because they're punished for it. And that's the situation, in my opinion. We're here in Alberta. We're being punished for working hard, for being independent, to be self-sufficient, to be wise users of our resources, to look after them. And we have an enemy that's out there in Ottawa and the rest of the world that wants to shut us down because we are that last beacon of freedom. We can show the world that this works, that the free market is wonderful, a great opportunity. But anyways, for me, this is the fight for freedom. This means forming government in 2023, showing Albertans what we can and are able to do with a functional government that's working for them and not one that's being dependent on Ottawa. But thanks very much for everybody who's coming out to this